Thanksgiving always brought a weird mix of emotions for me. Warm memories tangled up with a cold knot in my stomach. The smells, the laughter, the ritual of it all. It should have felt comforting. But in my family, tradition had a way of cutting both ways. My name's Ryan. I'm 32 now, and let's just say, I've learned to keep my expectations low when it comes to holidays. Not because I hate them. I actually used to love Thanksgiving. It was my favorite day of the year when I was a kid. But growing up in a family where your achievements are treated like accidents and your sacrifices like obligations, yeah, it does something to you. It wears you down. The thing is, I was never the golden child. That title belonged to my younger brother, Lucas. He's 29, and ever since we were kids, he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He could break a window, lie about it, blame me, and they'd still find a way to pat him on the back for being clever. Me? I once spilled orange juice on Mom's carpet when I was 10, and I didn't hear the end of it until college. If Lucas forgot to do his homework, the teacher was unfair. If I got a B+, I wasn't applying myself. And yeah, I used to try. I really did. I tried to win them over with good grades, then with helping around the house, then with just staying out of trouble. But at some point, I gave up on winning. I started focusing on building my own life, far away from the circus. I moved out at 18, worked 2 jobs through college, and built a decent life for myself. Not flashy, but stable. I run a mid-sized marketing firm now, the kind that doesn't make headlines but pays well enough to buy a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs and sleep at night without worrying about rent. I don't usually talk about money, partly because I know how my family gets when money is involved, and partly because I learned early on that flashing success only invites resentment from people who think they're owed a piece of it. But when my parents started having trouble a few years back, Dad's company downsized, Mom's retail job cut her hours, bills started piling up, I stepped in. I didn't make a big thing about it. I just offered to help. I covered their mortgage for a few months, then decided to go all in and buy them a house outright. A modest one, but a step up from where they were. Clean yard, updated kitchen, plenty of space for guests. They cried when I handed them the keys. Dad pulled me into a hug and muttered something about being proud. Mom was already planning Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't expect a parade or my face carved into Mount Rushmore. I just thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see me, not as a backup son or the one who got lucky or owes it to the family, but as someone who mattered, someone who gave. That was 3 years ago. Since then, not much has changed. Lucas still shows up late to family events and gets praised for gracing us with his presence. He still borrows money and forgets to pay it back. He still skips holidays and calls in halfway through dessert with some excuse about work or traffic or his on-again off-again girlfriend needing him. And my parents still cling to every word he says like he's the second coming. Me? I get asked why I didn't bring pie. Last year was rough. I'd offered to lead the Thanksgiving prayer, something my grandfather used to do before he passed. I just wanted to say a few words about gratitude, maybe acknowledge him, maybe make the moment meaningful. But before I could open my mouth, Mom cut me off with a tight smile and said, "Let's wait for Lucas. He should be the one to lead it." Never mind that he was over an hour late and texting from a bar. When he finally stumbled in, reeking of cologne and bourbon, she beamed at him like he was a war hero returning home. And when he slurred his way through a half-hearted prayer, no one blinked. No one cared. I remember sitting there, holding my glass of wine just a little too tightly, and telling myself, next year, don't do this to yourself again. But I did, because deep down, I still wanted to believe they'd come around. That maybe, just once, they'd see past the illusion and acknowledge what I'd given up for them, what I'd built for all of us. This year, I told myself, I'd play it cool. No expectations. Just dinner, then I'm out. I even offered to host it at my place. Big dining room, better kitchen, plenty of space. But Mom declined. She insisted on having it at her home, which, I mean, fine. Even if I paid for it, even if the deed's in my name, I didn't push. Let her have it. So I showed up on time this year. Brought stuffing, wine, a caramel apple pie from this fancy bakery that I had to pre-order 3 weeks in advance. Everyone was already there, my aunts, uncles, cousins. Even Lucas showed up early, which was a miracle in itself. He greeted me with a "yo, big money," and slapped my back like we were college buddies. I smiled, gritted my teeth, and told myself to just survive the evening. Dinner was, well, dinner. Mom made her usual spread: turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce that still held the shape of the can. Everyone gathered around the table, laughing too loudly, talking over each other. I took my usual seat at the end, the one Dad used to sit in before his sciatica started acting up. I noticed no one saved a seat for me at the center. That spot was for Lucas now. Of course. Then came the moment. Mom stood up, clinking her glass, and said, "All right, everyone, let's settle down." The room hushed. All eyes turned to her. She looked around with that practiced smile she always used at church bake sales. "Before we eat," she said, "I think it would be nice to have a few words." She turned toward me, and for a brief moment, I thought, maybe she'd let me. Maybe this was it. Maybe after everything, I could. "Ryan," she said, her voice soft but sharp, "don't embarrass yourself like last year. Just let your brother lead the prayer." The words hit me like a slap. I felt the blood drain from my face. A few people chuckled. Lucas stood up, already raising his glass. I sat there, frozen, my hands in my lap, fingers curled tight. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. And still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Not until dessert. Not until I brought out the box they made me swear I'd never open. If you'd looked at me during that moment, when Mom said those words, you probably wouldn't have seen much. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, like I'd been corrected for speaking out of turn. Like I was some intern at a meeting who misunderstood his role. But inside, something cracked. I stared down at the edge of my plate, while Lucas mumbled his way through a prayer that sounded suspiciously copied from a meme. Everyone laughed at his closing line. "And may the turkey be less dry than last year." Like it was the funniest thing in the world. Aunt Kathy clapped. Uncle Mike let out one of those loud, throat-clearing guffaws he always used when he wanted to seem more amused than he was. Even Dad chuckled, barely looking up from his wine glass. And me? I just sat there, slowly lifting my glass to my lips, praying that the bitterness in the wine would drown out the one swelling in my chest. I kept thinking, this is the table I bought. The roof over our heads is mine. The car in the driveway that Mom brags about? I made the last 3 payments on that. The kitchen she's cooking in? I paid for the renovation when the tiles started cracking. I paid for this life. And I was still expected to stay quiet. Dinner carried on like nothing had happened. Plates were passed. Compliments were thrown like rice at a wedding. "Oh, the stuffing's amazing, Linda." "Lucas, that story you told about your boss, hilarious." "Ryan, can you pass the butter?" It was like I wasn't really there. Not as a person, just a utility. The guy who brought the pie. The guy who signed the check. Lucas sat across from me, leaning back with his hands behind his head like he owned the place. He wore this smug little grin that only I seemed to notice. He knew. He knew what Mom said had stung. And he liked it. Every now and then he'd glance over and raise his eyebrows, like he was daring me to react. But I didn't. Not yet. After dinner, people drifted toward the living room. The TV came on. Dad flipped between football and a rerun of some sitcom that's been canceled for a decade. I started clearing plates, because of course I did. No one offered. No one said thank you. I just gathered them quietly, one by one, stacking them on the counter while voices and laughter filled the other room. That's when I overheard it. I hadn't meant to. I wasn't even eavesdropping. But the kitchen isn't far from the hallway, and I guess they thought I couldn't hear over the sound of the faucet. Lucas's voice, low but smug. "You think he's gonna make a scene?" "Mom, no, he knows better. He always acts like he's above it." "Lucas, I mean, the guy's gotta stick up his." "Dad? All right, enough." "Mom again. He just takes everything so personally. I mean, for heaven's sake, he bought the house. You'd think he'd be humble about it." Lucas laughed. "Yeah, I mean, congrats on doing the bare minimum, right?" Then someone, probably Aunt Kathy, joined in. "At least you still show up, Lucas. Some people think money's enough." I stood there, a plate in my hands, staring at the backsplash tiles I paid to have installed. I felt cold. Not angry. Not yet. Just cold. Hollowed out. Like all the pieces of me that used to care were slipping through a crack I couldn't close. I finished the dishes. I dried my hands. I stepped into the hallway with a fake smile like I hadn't heard a word. "Who wants pie?" I asked. My voice sounded far away, even to me. "Oh." Mom lit up. "Did you bring that caramel apple one again? The one from last year?" "I did." "Good boy," she said. "Good boy." I almost laughed. Like I was a Labrador. I sliced the pie, plated it, handed it out like a waiter at a family-friendly restaurant chain. No one noticed the slight tremor in my hands. Or maybe they did and didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. I sat back down with a cup of coffee and forced myself to chew and swallow. Then came the moment. Lucas, grinning like the sun was stuck behind his teeth, said, "Hey, Mom, should I show everyone the video?" She blinked. "What video?" "You know, the one from Vegas. The karaoke night." "Oh, Lord, yes," she laughed. "Everyone has to see it. Ryan, you've got to hear this." Lucas sang Bohemian Rhapsody in this tiny little bar, and people were cheering like he was Freddie Mercury reincarnated. He was already pulling out his phone. I sat there, sipping coffee, nodding politely while he connected it to the TV. The video played, Lucas standing on a cheap stage, drunk and wobbling, slurring through the lyrics. The room roared with laughter. Someone clapped. Dad said, "That's my boy. That's my boy." I'd heard those words before. Once. At my college graduation, Dad had said them with a tone of surprise, like he wasn't sure how I'd pulled it off. Lucas finished the song with a bow and a loud burp. Everyone cheered. I stared at my fork. Then, out of nowhere, Lucas looked at me and said, "You should come next time, Ryan. Loosen up a little. Maybe someone would actually cheer for you." I glanced up. Slowly. The whole room went still for half a second, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to laugh. Then Mom chuckled. "Oh, Lucas, don't be mean." But she was smiling. That was when something shifted. Not dramatically. Not like lightning and thunder. Just a click. A gear turning. A decision settling in my bones. I stood up and said, "Be right back. Got something in the car." Mom waved me off. "Don't take too long. We're doing family pictures." I walked out into the cold November air, my shoes crunching the gravel on the driveway I'd repaved last spring. I opened the trunk. Reached in. Pulled out the box. It was old. Cardboard. Faded duct tape along the edges. One side was marked in red Sharpie. "Do not open." I hadn't touched it in 10 years. Back when I first left home, Mom gave it to me. She looked nervous, which was rare for her. She said, "These are just old documents. Don't throw them away. But please, don't go through them. It's not for you. Just store it." And I did. For a while. But years later, curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. I read everything. And then I resealed it and promised myself I'd never bring it up. Never throw it in their faces. I told myself I was better than that. That no good ever came from stirring up family ghosts. But tonight, I wasn't feeling generous. I carried the box back inside. Everyone was still laughing about the karaoke. Someone had opened another bottle of wine. Lucas was leaning over his girlfriend's shoulder, showing her pictures on his phone. Dad was half asleep in the recliner. I walked into the room, held up the box. "Hey." Everyone turned. Mom frowned. "What's that?" I looked at her. "You remember this?" She stared at it like it was a snake. "Where did you get that?" "You gave it to me," I said. "Told me never to open it." Well, yes, but that was a long time ago." "It was," I said, setting it on the coffee table. "I didn't open it yet. I just let it sit there like a bomb, ticking." Lucas snorted. "What is it? Your old high school love letters?" "No," I said, smiling for the first time that night. "It's the reason we're all sitting in this house. It's the reason you still call this place Mom's home. It's the reason I stopped trying to explain myself years ago." The room went quiet. Mom stood up. "Ryan, I don't think this is the time." "Why not?" I said, louder than I meant to. "Why isn't this the time? You had time for videos, for jokes. You had time to tell me not to embarrass myself. You had time to laugh behind my back about how I'm just the guy with the wallet." Dad finally stirred. "Ryan, don't start something." "I'm not starting anything," I said. "I'm finishing it." My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. I could see Mom's eyes darting toward the box. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. Lucas rolled his eyes, clearly thinking I was making a scene for attention. He had no idea. "Inside this box," I said, "are documents. Letters. Agreements. Bank statements. Things you hoped I'd never see. Things I wasn't supposed to know." Mom's voice trembled. "Please, don't do this." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power in the room. "I'm not opening it," I said. "Not yet." Lucas laughed. "Oh my God, what is this? Some kind of Lifetime movie twist." I turned to him. "You think I'm bluffing?" He held up his hands, grinning. "I think you need to chill, bro." And that's when I said it. The thing I didn't plan to say. The thing that changed everything. I know about the trust fund, Lucas. The room froze. Every face turned toward me. Lucas's smirk died on his lips. Mom went pale. Dad's mouth opened and closed like he forgot how to breathe. And I just stood there, feeling every second of silence stretch like a rubber band about to snap. I let the tension hang in the air. Because the betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was what came next. For a solid 5 seconds, you could hear the furnace humming. That's how quiet the room got after I said it. Not a fork clinked. Not a cough. Just the low, metallic whir of warm air blowing through vents in the walls I paid to insulate. I know about the trust fund, Lucas. I repeated, not to twist the knife, but because part of me still couldn't believe I had to say it out loud. Lucas blinked, then scoffed, too fast. Dude, what are you even talking about? But his ears flushed red. He was always a terrible liar, especially when he was cornered. I looked over at Mom, who had one hand covering her mouth and the other trembling at her side. Her silence said more than anything Lucas could try to deny. You really think I wouldn't find out? I continued, slower now, quieter. That a box full of just old papers wouldn't eventually catch my attention? You handed me the evidence, Mom. All these years, you counted on me being too loyal, too polite, too naive to ask questions. But the truth has a way of leaking. What truth? Lucas laughed again, louder, looking around the room like someone would back him up. Seriously, what is he even saying? So I turned to the room. Since we're all here, let's talk about it, I said, gesturing to the box. Inside are legal documents. A trust, set up by Grandpa before he passed. One for each of us, Lucas and me. Except, mine was emptied out when I turned 20. Quietly. Legally. Because I gave permission, apparently. Meanwhile, Lucas's account stayed untouched. It grew. It's still growing. A gasp came from Aunt Marcy. Uncle Mike shifted in his seat, suddenly finding interest in his shoelaces. The cousins looked around at each other, their expressions flickering between confusion and awkward discomfort. Lucas snapped. This is ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. But his voice cracked. I pulled out one of the envelopes from the box and held it up without opening it. This is your signature, Mom. You co-signed the withdrawal request with Dad. I was 19. You told me I was signing a lease document for my dorm. I didn't. Her voice trailed off. You did, I said, quieter now. I double-checked with the bank last year. Had the forms reviewed by a friend who's a lawyer. You cashed out my share of Grandpa's trust fund to cover the down payment on the lake house. The one Lucas crashed his jet ski into and then sold behind your backs. More gasps. Lucas flinched. Dad stood up, face beet red, but he didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. I never asked for anything, I said. Not when I found out. Not when I realized why you were so weird about that box. I swallowed it. Told myself it was just money. That maybe you needed it more than I did. So I worked. I paid for college myself. I ate ramen and worked graveyard shifts while Lucas partied with Grandpa's inheritance. Okay, you need to calm down, Dad finally said. This is not the time or the place. No. I raised an eyebrow. Seems like the perfect time. Everyone's here. Everyone who laughed when I was told not to embarrass myself. Everyone who watched me scrape mashed potatoes into their plates while Lucas showed off videos of himself drunk in Vegas. Lucas's face was red now. You're seriously doing this? Over what? Some money you were never going to use anyway? That's ancient history. It's not about the money, I said, though I knew that was only half true. It's about what it meant. What it revealed. That you never saw me as a son. Just a resource. That you trusted Lucas with everything, including my share of the future, and left me to figure it out on my own. And when I made something of myself, you pretended like it was owed to you. Like I was just fulfilling some debt. No one spoke. For a long time. And then Mom, eyes wet but voice sharp, said, we did what we had to do. That sentence broke something in me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. Coldly, clinically honest. They had made a choice, between sons, between futures, and they did what they had to do. I nodded. Okay, I said, and I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked out the door. No dramatic exit. No slamming. No tears. Just silence. That was the last Thanksgiving I spent with my family. The first few weeks after that night were rough. Not in the soap opera way. No screaming matches, no lawsuits, but the quiet kind of rough. The kind where you wake up with phantom vibrations in your phone, half expecting a message that never comes. The kind where you go to make coffee and instinctively grab 2 mugs before remembering no one's visiting today. The kind where you sit in your car outside your own house, hand frozen on the ignition, because part of you still wants to drive over and talk it out. I didn't, though. I didn't reach out. And they didn't either. At first, I thought maybe I'd cave. Maybe Christmas would roll around, and I'd show up with a bottle of wine and an apology I didn't mean, just to keep the peace. But the more I sat with the silence, the more I realized how long I'd mistaken absence for peace. Just because things were quiet didn't mean they were okay. So I started over. It wasn't some grand, cinematic rebuild. No Rocky montage or inspirational music. Just small things. Intentional things. I cleared out the guest bedroom, not because I was expecting guests, but because I realized I'd been keeping it ready for family who never stayed. I replaced the old framed photos in the hallway with pictures from solo trips I took, but never displayed. Iceland, Kyoto, that hiking trail in Banff I nearly turned around on, but didn't. I also started going to therapy, which, honestly, I should have done years ago. I didn't go to blame anyone or unload all my bitterness. I went because I needed to understand why it had taken me so long to draw boundaries. Why I still felt like a traitor for standing up for myself. Your family raised you to believe that love is conditional, my therapist said in our 3rd session. It's not your fault that it feels unnatural to protect yourself, but it's your job now to learn. That hit hard. So I started learning. I read, journaled, went to those awkward social mixers where people try to make friends as adults and pretend it's not incredibly weird. I joined a rock climbing gym, not because I liked heights, but because the idea of failing over and over in public felt strangely therapeutic. I fell. A lot. But I got better. I got stronger. Business-wise, things exploded. I don't know if it was the anger that fueled me, or the clarity that came from finally dropping the emotional weight of my family. But I threw myself into work, landed a few massive clients, rebranded the company, hired a full-time staff. For the first time, I wasn't just getting by, I was thriving. And not to prove anything to anyone, just because it felt good to finally invest in myself. People noticed. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years started reaching out, not because of the drama, but because I had room for them now. I had time, energy, a personality that wasn't filtered through layers of people-pleasing. One night, maybe 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I got a text from Lucas. Hey, heard you're killing it. Congrats, man. Proud of you. No apology. No mention of what happened. I didn't respond. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From Mom. She didn't say she was sorry. She just said, I miss you. Things haven't been the same without you here. We didn't know how to handle everything. Maybe we made mistakes. But you're still family. Please don't stay away forever. It sat on my counter for days. Then one night, I poured myself a drink, sat down at the kitchen table, and read it again. And again, trying to find something in her words. Remorse, understanding, even guilt. But all I saw was regret for the consequences, not for the actions. She missed the benefits of me, the presence, the structure, the financial fallback, but not me. So I didn't reply. And yet, even with that distance, I felt better, lighter, lonelier, sure, but also real, honest. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was borrowing someone else's role in a family play where my character wasn't even given lines. I was Ryan. 32, independent, scarred, but healing, quietly building a life that no longer bent itself around people who didn't see my worth until it was too late. And then, just when I thought the past was fully behind me, a knock came at my door. It was my cousin Nathan, of all people, holding a flash drive and looking nervous. I think you should see this, he said. What was on that drive? That's when everything changed. Again. Nathan stood on my porch like a kid caught sneaking a cookie before dinner. Shoulders hunched, eyes darting, the flash drive in his hand trembling like it weighed 50 pounds. It was a warm spring evening, the kind where the air hums with possibility, but I could feel the storm behind his eyes. I hadn't seen him in months. He was one of the few family members I tolerated at gatherings, quiet, observant, didn't get drunk and slap your back when you weren't in the mood for it. He was also the only one who'd sent me a message after Thanksgiving, a simple "hope you're all right," that I never answered. I stepped aside and let him in without a word. My cat, Winston, darted past his legs, unimpressed by dramatic entrances. We sat in the kitchen. No wine this time. Just water and a thick silence between us. Nathan kept looking at the flash drive on the table like it might explode. What is it? I asked, voice low, controlled. He hesitated. Look, before I show you this, you need to know, I didn't go looking for it. It landed in my lap. I raised an eyebrow. Okay. You know I do freelance IT work, right? I nodded. Vaguely remembered that from a family barbecue a few years back, sandwiched between my uncle's racist jokes and Aunt Marcy's tirade about gluten. Well, a couple weeks ago, Lucas called me. Said he needed help recovering files from an old laptop. Said it was urgent, but also hush-hush. Offered me $500 just to come to his place and take a look. I blinked. Lucas offered you $500? To look at a laptop? Nathan nodded. Yeah, which was already suspicious. But whatever, easy money. I go over, do my thing. Turns out the laptop isn't even his. It's your dad's. Old one. Dusty. Probably hadn't been turned on in years. Lucas said something about needing a copy of an old resume. I thought that was weird, but whatever. He paused, reached for his water, but didn't drink. While I'm digging through files, I find this folder. Hidden, but not well. It's labeled Contracts, RJ. I click on it. First thing I see is your name. Then another file. And another. And then, I see documents with my name. My dad's name. I frowned. Your dad? He nodded. Yeah. Apparently my dad co-signed something. Some kind of backdated agreement that transferred portions of Grandpa's assets to guess who. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Lucas, Nathan said. Specifically, to a shell LLC that Lucas controls. And there's more. Tax evasion schemes. Undocumented transfers. A whole trail of forged or manipulated paperwork. I copied everything to finish the job like nothing happened. Took my payment. And left. I sat back. Cold crept up my spine. Why are you telling me this now? Nathan finally looked me in the eye. Because I thought you deserved to know. And because I think I might be on some of those papers too. I think Lucas used me. Used all of us as names to spread liability. If this stuff ever blew up legally, a bunch of us could get caught in the crossfire without even knowing we were involved. I stared at the flash drive. And you're sure it's all real? He slid it toward me. I triple-checked. And Ryan, it's bad. This isn't just favoritism anymore. It's theft. Fraud. Manipulation on a scale I didn't think Lucas was capable of. And your parents, they're in deep. I didn't touch the flash drive yet. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering like a war drum. So what do you want me to do with this? I asked. Nathan looked away. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to burn it. But another part of me, the part that remembers every time our family acted like Lucas was made of gold and we were made of cardboard, that part wants justice. Or revenge. Or both. I nodded slowly. We sat there in silence for a long time. When he left, I walked him to the door. He stopped on the porch, turned back, and said, just be careful, all right? Lucas is smarter than he looks. And he's not above playing dirty. I know, I said. He learned from the best. For the next 2 days, I didn't eat much. Didn't sleep. I was back in that numb, detached state I knew too well. But this time, it wasn't from grief. It was clarity. Focus. I went through every file on the drive. Hundreds of documents. Some were clumsy, like Lucas thought renaming a PDF would make it disappear. Others were meticulous, even professional. There were fake consulting fees funneled through family members, bogus investment reports, bank transfers timed to coincide with vacations my parents claimed on tax forms. But the crown jewel was a string of emails. Emails between my mom and Lucas. Between my dad and a shady accountant. Even one between Lucas and some guy named RJ that, based on the signature and routing IP, turned out to be a burner address Dad used when he didn't want his business traced. They weren't just hiding the trust fund. They were gutting it. Selling off assets, laundering the money through Lucas's fake companies, siphoning chunks into accounts registered overseas. Grandpa's legacy, meant for both of us, was being chewed up and swallowed while they smiled at Thanksgiving like nothing was wrong. But here's the thing about growing up in a family where you're constantly sidelined. You learn to observe, to adapt, to read people. And I realized, I didn't just have evidence. I had leverage. The kind that doesn't just shake a family, it collapses it. But I didn't want to explode a bomb for nothing. I wanted precision, timing, maximum impact. Not just for justice, but to finally show them who they overlooked. So I made a plan. First, I called Marissa. She's a real estate attorney I've worked with for years. Sharp, discreet, and loyal as hell since I saved her firm from a PR disaster 2 years ago. I didn't give her details at first. Just asked her to look into the deed on my parents' house, the one I technically owned, but allowed them to manage for tax purposes. She confirmed what I suspected. They'd filed a quitclaim deed behind my back, transferring ownership to Lucas. Fraudulently. That was step one. Next, I contacted an old college friend, Damien, who now works for a local investigative news outlet. I didn't give him the documents, yet. Just teased a potential story. Old money. Betrayal. A family dynasty with dark secrets. He bit immediately. I told him to wait for a follow-up. Then I reached out to Nathan again. Nate, I said over the phone, how do you feel about being part of something big? There was a long pause. Then a single word. I'm in. We met the next day. I laid it out. Not just revenge, but a surgical strike. I wanted to expose Lucas. Publicly. Strategically. But more importantly, I wanted to make my parents choose. Not between sons, but between comfort and truth. He nodded, a slow smile creeping across his face. So what's the play? Simple, I said. We invite them to dinner. I reserved a private dining room at a sleek restaurant downtown. Not fancy enough to raise suspicion, but exclusive enough to make them feel important. I used my assistant's number to call Mom and invite them all. Lucas, my parents, even Aunt Marcy and Uncle Mike. Told them it was a belated birthday dinner. I knew they'd come. They always showed up when there was free food and a chance to feel celebrated. Meanwhile, Nathan helped me quietly reach out to the rest of the cousins. Some were wary. Some were angry. One even cried on the phone when I told her what I'd found. The pattern had been there all along. Lucas getting mysterious cash infusions, managing properties he never paid for, dangling promises of family investments that never materialized. All they needed was proof. I gave them that. And then, I gave them a job. Show up to the dinner, I said. Dress nice. Smile. But don't say a word until I give the signal. When I do, you'll know what to do. They agreed. Even the quiet ones. Especially the quiet ones. The night of the dinner, I wore a navy suit. Nothing flashy. Understated, well-fitted. Confidence in fabric form. Nathan was already there when I arrived, seated near the far end of the long mahogany table, sipping water like he'd never touched anything stronger in his life. The others trickled in, cousins, uncles, family friends who'd been looped in at the last minute. Lucas was the last to arrive. He strolled in, 10 minutes late, wearing a smug grin and a leather jacket that screamed midlife crisis despite the fact he was only 30. He slapped my shoulder and said, "Look at you, Mr. Success. Gonna give us all stock tips." I smiled. Something like that. Mom looked radiant, beaming, dressed in gold. Dad was stiff beside her, eyes scanning the room like he expected to be ambushed. He wasn't wrong. Dinner began. Drinks flowed. Polite conversation hummed around us like static. For a while, it almost felt normal. Almost. Then, after the plates were cleared and the dessert menus appeared, I stood. Everyone quieted. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "It means a lot to see everyone here, especially after a tough year." I looked directly at my parents. You know, for a long time, I thought family was about sacrifice, about giving more than you receive, because love meant doing whatever it took to keep people safe, happy, comfortable. Some of them nodded. Mom smiled, sensing a compliment coming. But now I know love without honesty is just manipulation, and comfort built on lies is just a house of cards. I set my glass down. Nathan reached into his bag. "So let's talk about the truth." That's when I clicked the remote, and the projector screen behind me came to life. And what showed on it? That's where the real show began. The screen flickered to life behind me, casting a soft white glow across the stunned faces around the table. The restaurant staff had dimmed the overhead lights at my quiet request, which only heightened the drama of the moment. Forks froze midair. Glasses hovered near lips. For the first time in my life, I had their complete, undivided attention, not because they wanted to give it, but because I'd finally given them no choice. The first image to appear was a scanned copy of a document dated almost 15 years ago, the trust paperwork. Grandpa's signature at the bottom. A clear split, 50-50, to Lucas and Ryan J. Caldwell. I let it linger there for a beat. Then, the screen transitioned to the next page. A withdrawal form. My name again, but this time, my signature sloppily forged. Co-signed by Linda Caldwell and Robert J. Caldwell. Dated 3 months after I left for college. I turned to Mom, who sat rigid in her chair, lips pressed into a line so tight it looked painful. You remember this, Mom? I asked calmly. You handed me that manila envelope and said it was a lease for my dorm. You watched me sign a blank form because I trusted you. The screen changed again. A grainy black and white scan of a wire transfer from my trust fund account to a private LLC under Lucas's name. Don't worry, I said before anyone could object. That's just the tip of the iceberg. What followed was a carefully edited 15-minute presentation, part documentary, part expose, compiled by Nathan and me over the past few weeks. A tight narrative of betrayal. Every receipt, every fake company, every email, every name. I had redacted some of the more sensitive material involving cousins or extended family. I wasn't here to burn everyone down, but I made sure every piece that tied Lucas, Mom, and Dad to the fraud was crystal clear. The final slide? A screenshot of the burner email address Dad used. r.j.caldwellfinance@protonmail.com. And a reply from Lucas, laughing about how Ryan still hasn't figured it out. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in stunned silence. Then a low murmur as cousins leaned in, whispering to each other, eyes wide. Aunt Marcy turned to Mom with a face so pale it looked like she'd seen a ghost. Uncle Mike, normally the loudest man in any room, was dead silent, his expression twisted with something between horror and guilt. Lucas stood up fast, his chair screeching behind him. Okay, this is a joke, he said, eyes darting wildly. None of this means anything. Anyone can fake this crap. You seriously brought everyone here to show off your little PowerPoint. I didn't flinch. Actually, I brought everyone here to return something. Something I took back from you last week. I pulled out a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. It stopped in front of Mom with a quiet thud. She didn't touch it. That's the corrected deed to the house, I said. Filed, notarized, and legally transferred back to me. Turns out, filing a quitclaim deed without the legal owner's consent, especially when forged, is a criminal offense. But I decided not to press charges. Not yet. Dad looked like he'd swallowed a stone. You had no right. I cut him off. No right. You gave up the right to honesty a long time ago. I paid for that house. You tried to steal it. Be grateful I'm giving you 30 days to move out. Gasps. Cousins covering mouths. A glass tipped over. No one touched their dessert. And Lucas, I added, turning to him. I've already submitted everything from the flash drive to a forensic accountant. He's prepping a report for the IRS and the state auditor. You know that lake house you sold for cash after wrecking it? That'll be the first breadcrumb they follow. Lucas's face contorted into something between a sneer and a pout. You'd really do that? You'd ruin your own family over some trust fund. You ruined it, I said. I'm just shining a light on the wreckage. Nathan stood then, quietly, calmly. I'd like to add that I've also removed Lucas from all 3 of the tech investment groups he used my name to access. My lawyer's filing a civil claim this week for identity misuse. The hits kept coming. Aunt Marcy turned on Mom. You told me there was nothing left. You said Dad went broke before the trust could be divided. You let me cash out my retirement early to help Lucas with that startup, the one that never existed? Mom didn't speak. Her eyes were glazed. I think she was in shock. And still, I wasn't done. One more thing, I said, reaching into my jacket. I pulled out a printed invitation, thick cardstock, gold foil trim. Next month, I'm launching a foundation in Grandpa's name. The Caldwell Legacy Trust. Scholarships for first-gen college students. Financial literacy programs for at-risk youth. And a digital archive of every donation made in his name. Transparent. Accountable. Real. I walked over and placed the invitation in front of Mom. You always said you missed the way Thanksgiving used to feel, I said softly. This is what gratitude looks like. Not a seat at the table you stole, but building a new table entirely. I turned to leave. Lucas shouted something. Too fast, too incoherent to matter. Something about defamation. About lawyers. But no one stood with him. No one followed him out when he stormed from the room. Mom and Dad remained seated, motionless. I didn't expect them to chase me. I didn't even look back. Because I was done. The fallout was swift. Within a month, Lucas was under investigation. The shell companies unraveled quickly. Turns out, when you're arrogant enough to name one of your offshore accounts Big Dog LLC, It doesn't take long for accountants to sniff out the fraud. His assets were frozen. His accounts were flagged. His condo in Miami, the one he bragged about to all our cousins, was seized for investigation. He tried to spin it, of course, claimed it was all a family misunderstanding. But with so many relatives filing civil complaints, and the media starting to poke around thanks to Damien's now-published article, his denials didn't carry weight anymore. Mom and Dad quietly moved out of the house. No note, no apology, just a key left in the mailbox and a voicemail I never listened to. They moved in with Aunt Diane in Nevada. I know this only because Nathan told me. He's kept tabs, says they don't go out much anymore. As for me, I did what I promised. The Caldwell Legacy Trust launched with a six-figure endowment, funded entirely from my own pocket. We awarded our first 3 scholarships this past fall. I attend every interview personally. I shake their hands. I hear their stories. And every time, I think of Grandpa. Not my parents. Not Lucas. But the man who once told me, at age 12, you don't need to be loud to lead. Just be the one who holds the light when everyone else is lost. I held the light, and I walked myself out of the dark. I still celebrate Thanksgiving. Not with family, not in that house, but with friends. Real ones. People who show up because they want to, not because they expect something. We laugh. We eat. We toast. And sometimes, when the table gets quiet for a moment, when the candles flicker and the air smells like cinnamon and roasted garlic, I sit back and feel it. Peace. Earned. Not inherited. And that is how I finally took my seat at the table. This time, the one I built myself.